I am live. Hello, it's 1:46 p.m. Eastern Time, where I am, Gordon Causey, coming to you live and unscripted as always at a different time from a different location. If you look at the thumbnail picture for this video, you'll notice that I'm in my usual spot, which is behind my dining room window, which during the daytime gets a lot of sun and you can see what it does to the screen. And this room isn't that great, but it's better than a big blast of light. At any rate, again, today it's now 1:47 p.m. afternoon here in the Eastern Time Zone. I'm in Northumberland County, Ontario, southeastern Ontario, about an hour east of the GTA, an hour east of Oshawa. Shirunian has shown up. What's up? Well, there are a few things happening in the world right now that and the title of this is that we're right now August 31st. Anna Monarchy is here saying hello to the Fringe Gang. That's right. Those who, listening to the views of fringe Canadians with unacceptable views. And Daniel Copeman, salut, bonjour, mon ami. Now everyone's showing up. It's a rain where I am. It's a rainy Saturday, so not much. Can't really go outside and do much. And I was checking out. I'm just consuming content online, and it was 85 years ago today that the world was on the brink of World War II. Second World War. It was on September 1st, 1939, when Poland was invaded by Nazi Germany, and that started the dominoes falling that led to World War II. And I on my Facebook account, someone had sent me a message, Pam. I have somewhere in and around 4,000 friends and followers on Facebook. And I'm going to read the message she sent. It was a cut and paste of a forwarded messages that she had received. Please consider this information with love and knowing our peaceful purpose, not fear, as it is time for us to ramp up our peaceful light and send love waves of it out far and wide. Here's another take on the energies right now. I'm not big into this energies stuff, and I'm certainly not into astrology, but this post has some of it. On September 1st, Pluto will be perfectly retrograde back in Capricorn. I don't know what that means. And then they're writing the Cabal, and I think most of us will know what the term cabal means, plans to conduct a nasty, dark ritual on this day. World War II broke out on September 1st, 1939, and that is true. They want to use the World War timeline to trigger World War III. This September 1st, 85th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II, while we can avoid the outbreak of a third world war, it will require collective effort. September 1st to September 9th this year is the period when the cabal will do everything they can in order to manifest World War III. During that time, we hope everyone can organize, join mass peace meditations as many times as possible. And then it had a link to something on YouTube, Meditation for Peace, 1st of September. And this, I mean, I just did a video not too long ago, within the last couple of weeks, probably within the last less than 10 days, saying, are we on the brink of World War III? And you've seen that video, probably a lot of you. I do see us being at something of a tipping point. We've got so many things happening in the world right now that what's just happened in the world. I was just watching on YouTube earlier today. There was Reuters, which is a wire service, had images of Jenin or Yenin, Jenin. That's a city in Israeli Samaria, typically referred to as the West Bank, where there seemed to be large-scale Israeli military operations going on. What the Israelis are saying is that they are conducting preventive or preemptive uh, strikes against militants within the West Bank, that they're going in, and they say that they have intelligence that is leading them to believe that Islamic Jihad and other terrorist groups are planning bombings, terrorist style activity in Israel. And so to prevent that from happening, they are they're proactively going into the West Bank and dismantling these operations. That's the Israeli narrative. A lot of people will say that that's just an excuse, that they want to expand their broader war, that a lot of the rhetoric online now is that, of course, they say that Israel is committing a genocide in the Gaza Strip, and that they want to take their genocide from Gaza into the West Bank. That's the anti-Israeli rhetoric that's circulating. However, interestingly, the United States just killed 17 members, including senior members of Islamic State, also known as ISIL or Daesh, and in Iraq, in rural desert type locations, that the United States went in preemptively and took out Islamic militants attached to Islamic State. And see, that's where I see the battle lines drawing up. It's about the battle line that I can see leading to World War III is between the Western world, United States, Canada, Britain, Israel, certainly, more broadly speaking, NATO, getting into a war with the Islamic world, including a NATO nation, Turkey, because Turkey, Erdogan, or however you pronounce that man's name, who's the prime minister or president of Turkey, has been threatening to invade Israel. Let me catch up on what's being said. Daniel says, good afternoon. Hey guys, it's raining in Montreal as well. I'm not that far from Montreal. I'm probably about a 4-hour drive. Anna Monarchy says, we're a bunch of online lurkers. You're like me. I mean, I came across this video about what's happening in Jenin or Yenin, however you pronounce it. I don't know whether the J is pronounced as a J or an H or a Y. Yenin, in the West Bank. So I saw that. I'm lurking around constantly. I was just watching a video that's incredibly interesting, put out by this Dr. Philip McMillan, who has a channel called VJON, VEJON Health. He was doing a live with 2 public health officials who went counter narrative and got jumped all over during the early days and ongoing through COVID. And what I'm finding incredibly interesting about their video is that Dr. McMillan, for his part, strikes me as being a bit of an alarmist. He's warning of a coming storm. He calls it spike-triggered autoimmune response mechanism, and he thinks that we are heading into a healthcare storm, that there's going to be very bad things happening on the health front to public health. That curtain in front of me, that improves the exposure just a bit. And so he is very circumspect in the language. At one point, he said in a video I saw previously, he talked about how people's immune systems may have an issue due to having their immune systems being stimulated. And he said, I'll put it that way, and you can probably figure out what I mean. And I know what he means. I think I'm 99.9% sure I know what he means when he talks about people who have had their immune systems, quote unquote, stimulated. In case if you saw that. Daniel Copeman is writing, we wait with bated breath for the next show. Ha 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 ha. Oh man, what it strikes me is that, it's a rainy Saturday where you are, where I am. We're online, we're looking at what's going on in the world. And I just decided that with this being the 85th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II, that, and then having seen this message from my friend Pam on Facebook, it struck me that, wow, okay, 85 years ago, World War II started, which dramatically changed the landscape and the world order of that day. The Great Britain went from being the preeminent military and economic power in the world, and they basically fully passed the baton over to the United States. At the end of World War II, the United States was now the predominating power in the world, both military, in terms of military and economy. Um, I'm sorry about Antimonarchy that things aren't going well for you. You're out of Timmy's using the Wi-Fi. Uh, for what it's worth, when I'm out, I have my old disconnected cell phone that still works, and I myself will use um, Timmy's or the grocery store or wherever I happen to be if it has Wi-Fi, because I don't have data. I don't have, the phone isn't even hooked up. The only thing I can use it for, because the SIM card is expired, is if in emergency, I guess I could call 911. Uh, and Antimonarchy uses a word, VAIDS. We all know what AIDS is. You should, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And you just stick a V in front of that, and I'll leave you to guess what the V stands for. V, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, stimulated immune systems, stimulated, but maybe not in a good way. I'll be amazed if Dr. McMillan, Dr. Philip, I think it's Philip McMillan, I will be very surprised that the live that he's doing right now, I think it's even still ongoing. It was about half an hour in, and he had two guests on, one who was a public health officer or public health official in Hawaii, and she was talking about having conducted PCR arrays and the protocols around them for various studies. And then she was amazed that she wasn't even consulted when they started doing PCR arrays, setting up the test to test for COVID. And she immediately saw huge issues with it and realized that it would generate massive numbers of false positives. And when she reached out to the Ministry of senior health officials in the state of Hawaii, that the answer back to her was crickets. It's like they wanted to gear the tests in such a way, amplification cycle threshold, put it up so high so that the numbers would be, that it would drive a political narrative. I got to be careful because I'm not a public health official. Anything I say, verify it. I'm suggesting that you watch that video, V John Health, VEJON. Anyway, let's see. Sharunyan's asking if I have been to Anchorage, Alaska. No, I have not. My bucket list still for Canada. I have not been to British Columbia or Saskatchewan or PEI. I've been to every other province, so I've made it to 7 out of 10, but I haven't been to our 3 territories, Nunavut, Northwest, or Yukon. And I've probably been to 25 states, 25 states, somewhere in that neighborhood, but I've never gotten up to Alaska. It would be nice. Antimonarchy writes that they got rain up in Alliston last night, but I have nothing better to do. Hey, tomorrow is the start of September. Are we on the cusp right now? That's the question I'm asking. Are we on the cusp of something majorly blowing up? And I don't know. I genuinely, I don't have, my crystal ball is cracked. My magic 8 ball is leaking, so I'm not going to tell you that. But at the same time, you guys know, and anyone watching this channel knows that I see things moving in this direction. We've got all these health scares seemingly coming together at the same time. Uh, I should mention, and I did a video about this on my YouTube channel. Let's see, or on my Facebook channel rather. And I'm finding on Facebook I can really push the envelope now in ways that I could not on YouTube. In ways that YouTube would jump all over me. Facebook has kind of taken the reins off, and I'm allowed to go a lot further. And I'm pushing the envelope regularly. I certainly did in my most recent video on that platform. I said things there that I wouldn't say here. And I'm trying to remember what the news source was so that I can pull up the article, but it was in the Hill. The Hill. Let's see. Yeah, there's an article that came out in the Hill, and this was within the last 2-3 days. And when we talk about all these storm clouds forming on the health front, we have COVID, we have bird flu, we have monkeypox, we have triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis, and it's like the fear campaign is mounting up. And this article came out in the Hill, and I'll share the link with you in the live chat. And I don't know if I'm still talking. I lost, oh, wow. I thought I lost the tab, but it just moved. All right. I'm going to share with you a tab or something that was written in The Hill, which for those of us who are Canadian, The Hill is the US version of Canada. The Canadian version is called The Hill Times. It's a political publication. Sandy Sanderson has shown up. I'm just going to catch up before I read this article. It is freaky, and I've just linked it. Sandy says, hey back, Sandy. And Marky would use free Wi-Fi, even if I did have data, of course. Daniel's writing, has he spoken about cytokine storms in the body? I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he has. And just to put a point on that, if anyone is unfamiliar with that term or doesn't remember what it means, that's when the immune system goes haywire and basically starts attacking itself. Something of an autoimmune condition is my understanding. Again, don't quote me on anything, but this cytokine storm is when the immune system becomes overstimulated and it starts attacking not just disease tissue or viruses or things, but it actually starts attacking healthy tissue, antibodies, things that you need start getting attacked as well. And Monarchy writes, I have a little trailer, but it's too far outside of town to go to and from regularly with my stuff, especially now since I pulled a bunch of stuff, so I have to take it easy and recover. Like me, bike riding, basketball playing. I'm feeling a lot better today. Good night's rest. Sharunian's saying to go to Arizona because the dry heat is much cooler than Southern Ontario and our unbearable humid heat. One day I had a buddy down. He moved from Arizona and he moved down to North Carolina. The guy I used to do podcasts with, and the one I did the podcast on with guys like Dr. Robert Malone. Daniel writes, cusp? No, it's inevitable. We're moving in that direction. And getting back to an earlier theme of mine where I've said I see so many different things on the horizon all coming at once, one of them being health, Well, another one being the economy. When the rail shutdown was going on in Canada, I saw that as another potential one. I thought that that would cripple supply lines and the supply chain in Canada. It could have impacted food security. Glad to have seen that one go away, but goodness knows there are other ways it could manifest itself. There are other things that could happen that could severely disrupt the supply chain and food security. The rail strike appears to be pretty much yesterday's news. Uh, and Monarchy writes, a bit different from what Gordon said about a crystal ball, but that made me think of it. And then, and Monarchy is channeling the Wizard of Oz, Tripoli, Mpox, H1N5, oh my. Yeah, monkeypox, COVID, and bird flu, oh my. Unfortunately, it's 4. Red rum. And if you don't know that yet, you've never seen or read Stephen King's The Shining. So listen to what's being said. This is an article that was written by someone named Aaron Solomon on August 29th, so just 2 days ago, just over 2 days ago, 9 a.m. And this is in a major U.S. political publication. As summer 2024 draws to a close, the U.S. finds itself once again grappling with a surge in COVID-19 infections. This wave has taken many people by surprise, particularly as the country has largely consigned the pandemic to the past. While public life has pretty much returned to pre-pandemic norms, something almost none of us would have believed in the summer of 2020, the virus has not. Mutations of the virus continue to occur and new variants are emerging, posing ongoing challenges to public health and safety. As we look ahead to the remainder of 2024 and into early 2025, we need to take stock of where we are, understand the factors driving this resurgence, and better anticipate how the pandemic might evolve. The recent surge has disrupted summer travel plans, overwhelmed healthcare facilities in certain areas, and left many Americans dealing with the familiar symptoms of fever, cough, and fatigue. The summer months, typically associated with a lower respiratory virus activity, have instead seen a significant uptick in COVID-19 infections. Several factors contribute to this unexpected surge. One factor is the high transmissibility of these newer variants. The virus has continued to mutate, with certain variants displaying enhanced ability to spread, even among populations with high vaccination rates. I'm going to just skip ahead, but basically it's saying we may need, it's contemplating reintroducing COVID-style mandates of distancing, masking, and goodness knows, probably even vaccine mandates would be on the table. That's the tone of this article. And it's frightening. It is frightening because those of us who were lucky enough to either, to be able to refuse and who said no to getting those shots. And I say lucky because a lot of people who didn't want to take them felt they basically had no choice. I have to take it. I need to, I need to work. My mother-in-law, my family member is dying in a different part of the country or a different part of the world, and I need to get there. And that was the priority, but you couldn't get onto a plane without getting the shot. So a lot of people only took them under duress, only because they saw no other option. Those of us who were lucky enough to avoid having to take them, are we going to be in a situation where the restrictions on those who don't take a new updated shot, are there going to be increased restrictions on us? And are we going to be able to continue to refuse? In New Brunswick, they did for a short time, they wouldn't allow you to go into a grocery store if you weren't jabbed. You talk about the mark of the beast and not being able to buy and sell in the marketplace unless you have the mark and the number of its name either on your hand or on your forehead. Well, if you didn't have that jab in New Brunswick for a time, you could not buy groceries. And there's also something that was shared that I want to manufacturing and supply agreement between Pfizer, Canada, and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada, represented by the Minister of Public Works and Government Services Canada, dated as of October 26, 2020. And here's what it says: Purchaser acknowledgement. This is section 5.5 of the agreement. Purchaser acknowledges that the vaccine and materials related to the vaccine and their components and constituent materials are being rapidly developed due to the emergency circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic and will continue to be studied after provision of the vaccine to purchaser under this agreement. And then this is the highlighted portion, the alarming portion. Purchaser, meaning the government, further acknowledges that the long-term effects and efficacy of the vaccine are not currently known and that there may be adverse effects of the vaccine that are not currently known. Further, to the extent possible, purchaser acknowledges that this product shall not be serialized. And this is the product that so many Canadians felt that they were manipulated, forced, coerced into taking, that they took under duress. And that is heinous. But because of the pure fear porn propaganda that was dominating, a lot of people simply were not thinking. They were too scared. COVID had been presented as this universally deadly pathogen, one size fits all. Anyone who gets this, the impression was, would be going to hospital and being, put into a bed in critical care and possibly even ventilated. And that was a universal prognosis. And it was almost presented that anyone who was asymptomatic, perfectly healthy, no symptoms or whatever, they were just incredibly lucky. They were something of the exception to the rule. Daniel writes, I reflected and chose to take all the flack and penalties, miss parties. I will never comply. I'm ready to deal with the repercussions of my choice. I'll go to jail if need be. The pastor at my church and I were joking that we were going to be in a detention center somewhere and that they wouldn't put us together, that they'd separate us because they wouldn't want individuals being around friends, people that they knew from prior times. Crazy, crazy, crazy. And are we on the cusp of it again? I don't want to fear monger anyone, but at the same time, forewarned is forearmed. Sojourner Dynamis, my friend from the Netherlands, Dutch, has dropped in. Just dropping in, no worries. Daniel writes, whatever the government suggests, the opposite. We're from the government, and the scariest, Ronald Reagan once said, the scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And this is an unfortunate reality in our world now, is that erosion trust in public institutions and our governments, even in the judicial process, in media, trust is gone. We don't trust anybody. And sadly, for a society to have a unifying ethic, a unifying, that which makes us a society, there needs to be trust in public institutions, in our health officials, in our government, in our judiciary, in the media. Without that trust, everyone starts going off in their own direction. It used to be there were always individuals, a small number of individuals who, didn't trust anything, who were paranoid. And we would, but they were a small minority. Now it's pervasive. It's now anyone with two brain cells to rub together now knows that anything you see on the media, unless it's a sports score, unless they're reporting on the score of a baseball, hockey, football game, basketball game, that you've got to be incredible. They only present one side of the story. They censor, they manipulate, they lie, they contort, they call ivermectin horse paste when it's, a proven antiviral that's for things like malaria. They would prescribe it prophylactically, preventatively. People traveling to areas where there was malaria would be given by their doctor, by public health officials, here, take ivermectin just in case. And all of a sudden now, don't take ivermectin, it's dangerous. And I was like, what? And Joe Rogan took it, and they stop taking horse paste, Joe. And it's like they lie, 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 lie. Anyway, uh, yeah. So Daniel, if the government says go left, go right. Anna Markey was in jail when the first CTV broadcast about COVID came out, and I called it there. I was at the time I was serving in the military at a radar station communication center, and we had to have a TV on during the day during business hours, from 7, 8 in the morning until 3, 4 in the afternoon. And we were only during daytime hours, we were only allowed to watch current affairs news programming. And I constantly was walking by the TV and flipping the bird and said, oh, get lost, this isn't even journalism. The deadly coronavirus, when did a virus ever get a branding statement? Give me a break. This is marketing, it's not news, it's not journalism. And Sojourner Didymus brings up a point, and this is an important point. Thomas is talking about how the Bible instructs us to abide by the government in Romans 13. And Paul writes his letter to the Roman church talking about government being there for our good, for our benefit, and not to do us harm. And so we are to abide, but I think you have to read it in that context, because Paul, at that time, the Christian church at that point was not being persecuted. Rome hadn't figured out what to do. When Paul wrote that letter to the Roman church, it was about 30 or so years after Jesus had gone to the cross. He was writing, actually 20 odd years. It was written in around 55 AD. So 20 or so years after Jesus went to the cross. And at this point, Roman officials didn't know what to make of this new Christian faith, these followers of the way. And in a lot of respects, they viewed it as just another branch of Judaism. This is just another sect of Judaism. You have the Essenes, you have in today's context, we have Hasidic Jews, Sephardic Jews, so this is just another sect of Judaism. And the Christians, the persecution was coming from Jews. It was there was Jewish persecution. Paul himself had been persecuting the church in that Roman controlled world. And Paul was able to, when he was at risk of being executed over promoting Jesus, he actually fell back on his Roman citizenship to protect himself from the angry mob. So, in terms of Thomas, when you talk about who is Sojourner Didymus, talking about Romans 13, I think we have to understand it in the context of Paul's time. The government is here for good and to establish order. Is that still the case in today's world? I mean, did the Nazis, when you had when they were knocking on Anne Frank's door? So what are you going to do? The government is telling you that Jews represent a threat to the health and safety of people of WWII, and it is required that you turn over any Jews and have them sent away to an Auschwitz, Dachau, or Treblinka, or wherever. Are you going to obey? Are you going to abide by the government as commanded by Romans 13? Or are you going to be discerning and not abide by what the government says? Got to be circumspect. It's, and things have to be understood contextually. Anarchy wrote that he hasn't had a cold since early 2010 because I take he takes the government's advice, and when they say left, he goes right. Sojourner writes, it's of course not a blind obedience, but insofar it doesn't violate God's prescriptions, I think we should mostly. Well, this is where I talk about, how the total breakdown in trust, where people no longer trust public health officials, the media, gut politicians. We don't trust anyone anymore. A large segment of the population does not. And that is not good in the sense that it leads to a society going off in 15, 20, 30 different directions. There's no unifying force, there's no unifying ethic. And so it's hard to have a culture, it's hard to have a community ethic when there is so little trust. And I think even Jesus recognized this during his ministry. You'll recall that so often after he healed someone, he would say, don't do anything, don't say anything about it. Just go and, make the sacrifices as required by the law of Moses. Jesus didn't want people being kicked out of the synagogue because my interpretation is that Jesus realized the importance of community and the importance of these relationships that existed. And so he did not want people being kicked out of the synagogue, which in a fashion meant to be kicked out of the culture of the society. You are now a leper, a social leper, and and that was not. And you could also, once you're removed from the community, then you're no longer an influence on it. You can no longer be that light in the darkness. So it's not easy to navigate. When do you comply? When do you not comply? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who lived through the Nazi era, wrote extensively on this because a lot of Germans initially complied, and then as time went on, started to realize that they were abetting evil. But then once you've started in a direction, it's hard to change. For a lot of people right now who went along with everything and got 1 and 2 and even a booster or two, it's been difficult for them to admit to themselves that they got fooled, that they regret it, but at the same time they'll be apologetic. Well, it was an emergency. Well, given the conditions that existed at that time, they will be apologetic for the authorities and say, given the circumstances, it was a very dangerous situation. So mistakes were made, but they weren't intentionally made. These were mistakes in the context of an emergency situation. And it's what I talk about all the time, how people lose their ability to think critically when they're scared, and the news was programming fear constantly. Anarchy writes that even some sports game outcomes are questionable. I'd say they are, but in the context of how the games are refereed, when the news comes on and tells you that the Toronto Blue Jays lost 2-0 to the Minnesota Twins, that's what happened. Now, was that call at second base a good call or not? And did they intentionally call him safe to help Minnesota out? Well, maybe, and they might even mention that in the broadcast. But the score is the score is the score. I'm just reading up. Daniel Coleman writes, except if the government is borderline rogue and tyrannical, and I'd highlight and quote the word if. I've said it many times, Trudeau, our Liberal government in this country, is not interested in pursuing the policies and doing things that are for the benefit of the broader majority of the Canadian population. Trudeau's serving a different master. And Monarchy writes, I used to debate against Christianity online and honestly be mocking and condescending sometimes. Guess what? Me too. Not so much online, but more in face to face interactions. And I did not know near as much as I do now. I hadn't read the Bible cover to cover. It's wonderful. And I think that's a lot of people who criticize Christianity and the Christian faith, is they come at it from a position of ignorance like I was, and they haven't even read. It's like criticizing a movie you haven't even seen because you've heard the chatter out there and the chatter resonates with you, and you hear something stupid from the movie, and so you say, what a garbage movie. You've seen it? No, I'm not going to bother seeing that crap. And that's people's reaction to Christianity. They say, you ask them, have you read the Bible? Have you been to church? No, I'm not. That's all crap. I'm not going to investigate. I'm not going to look into it. I'm good. It's garbage. How do you know it's garbage? I was told. I heard this. Well, have you read the Bible? No, I haven't read the Bible. Not going to. Well, and it's not an easy thing to read the Bible. It's 66 books. It's not a book. It's 66 books, and it takes it takes a year to read the Bible unless you're really a diligent reader. And then, even then, you're looking, at best, if you were to read, 100 pages a day, you'd still be looking at a month or so. So Anna Monarchy doesn't do that anymore, mocking and debating and condescending about Christianity. Sojourner Didymus writes, was the government for good when, paraphrasing Jesus, the blood of the Jews was mingled with idol offerings? You'll have to give me the passage, the chapter and verse, and the book, because I think you're talking about Old Testament times when when the temple was desecrated, really desecrated by, I think it was the Greeks. And Monarchy writes, I'm not religious, but Christianity is being hated on by our mutual evil enemies, and Christianity does a lot of good, including for me, through charity and shelter programs I used to go to. I was a teen, bit of an online troll in some cases, and Monarchy, Christ is there for you. You just need to humble yourself, take your hands off the wheel, give it all over to Christ. Give it all over. Pick up a Bible if you can get your hands on one, but realize that Jesus went to the cross for you, for me, for everyone. And you're not a perfect creature. You're not justified in of yourself. You are a fallen, broken, sinful creature, no different from myself, no different from anyone here, no different from anyone else in the world. You have fallen short, and hand it all over, and you can overcome anything. You can overcome the challenges you're experiencing now. But most importantly, you will be tied into life everlasting, because now, through Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, you have been made righteous, not because of yourself. You did nothing. Jesus did it all. And for that, you give him all the honor, all the glory, all the praise. It's not your life, it's his life now. Because he lives, you too shall live. I can't testify any better than that. These times are challenging, and these challenging times have always existed. This life is a struggle, and we all have to work out our own salvation through fear and trembling. Those are Paul's words. I don't have any words. The only words I have are the words given to me by the Father. And, I always go back to Ecclesiastes, where Solomon wrote, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is just vanity. Everything is just chasing the wind. It's all just, everything that's been said by me has been said for thousands of years going back. And the church is so divided in terms of doctrine. Are you millennial? Are you pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib rapture? Do you believe in the rapture? Do you believe in supersessionism? Do you believe in replacement theology? Do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? Jehovah's Witnesses, do you believe in the Trinity? And we divide and we fight and we argue amongst each other. Christ, we are to be one. Read John, the Gospel of John, chapter 17. Christ prayed for us to be unified in his name and to drop these doctrinal differences, which is difficult because we love our traditions just as much as the Jews of Jesus's own day loved their traditions. They loved their traditions. Wash your hands thoroughly before eating because there may be some unclean element on your hand and you don't want to eat it. And so you wash your hands before, and then Jesus's disciples are walking through the field and they're plucking, bits of grain and they're eating them with unwashed hands. And the Pharisees are all, their shorts get in a knot. And why are you allowing your disciples to do this? Oh my goodness, it goes against our traditions. Well, yeah, for your traditions, your doctrines, your practices, your rites, your rituals, it's a matter of the heart. Jesus said that to the woman at the well. She said, you Jews, you worship in the temple, but you don't allow us Samaritans in the temple, and we worship on the mountain. And Jesus said, the time is coming and is now here when the Father seeks those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And that comes from the heart. It doesn't come from your religious rituals, your religious practices, your traditions, your doctrines. Invite the Holy Spirit to come in and to guide you and to take your hands off the wheel and let Jesus let the Lord God Almighty, he who created everything, let him steer the vehicle. Anyway, Amonarchy says, I read the Old Testament when I was 10, didn't really understand it well back then. It makes more sense now. I also read a little bit of the Old Testament here and there, and like a third of the Quran. I've read very little of the Quran, just tiny little snippets here and there as it comes up. Sojourner Dedimus says that Jesus was talking about current events. I don't know. Luke 13:1. Okay, that's the chapter reference. And Jesus talking about current events. I'll look that up when the live stream ends. And Anamarchy believes that he sinned worse than the rest of us here, probably. And doesn't matter. One sin poisons, it's like one drop of poison pollutes the whole well. One bit of sin poisons our whole being. We are all sinful creatures. We are all fallen. We all have no chance, standing before a completely perfect, righteous God. And that's why Jesus went to the cross. His blood sacrifice washes us clean and reconciles us to God, but it's nothing we can do. The only thing we can do is acknowledge Christ as Lord and Savior, invite him in, give him the wheel, and give him all the honor, glory, and praise, and realize that, and humble ourselves and say, it ain't me. It ain't me. Daniel writes, Jesus is king forever and ever. Amen. Nowadays, some of the other street people in town say to me and others that I'm one of the best guys in town and totally trustworthy. Great to hear. Pray, Anna Monarchy, pray. Put your supplications before the Lord. Pray in a spirit of, honesty and truth. Lay your heart bare and trust in him. And realize that it's through Christ living in us that we do good. Daniel Coleman writes, death before dishonor. Anna Markey writes, lots of street people are sketchy, shady snakes. Yeah, I used to work downtown Toronto, and I used to know a number who hung out in front of the building where I worked at Yonge and Dundas. I was right, if you know downtown Toronto, I was in the Toronto Eaton Centre Tower that was on the west side of Yonge Street, just south of Dundas. There were three Toronto Eaton Center Towers attached to the Eaton Center. I think the address, I can't remember the address. I think it was 200 Yonge Street, I think, but that was so long ago. Going back to in and around the year 2000, back during the tech boom. Daniel Copeman writes that lots of people are sketchy. Good point, Daniel. A lot of people, regardless of their situation. There are sketchy people sitting next to you if you go to church. There are sketchy people there. There are people who go to church, I'm convinced, simply to make connections for the business that they're trying to promote. And they think it looks good. And it's not for me to judge them. That's my discerning opinion. What happens to them at judgment, that's up to the boss. He'll decide. And if it'll never happen, but if I'm asked my opinion, I'll say forgive them because you forgave me, forgive them. Because gosh knows, in many ways, I'm a sketchy person too. I've got plenty of logs in my own eye. Virtue Signal Side is here. Haven't seen you for a bit. Are we judged for who we are at the moment of death or the life we lived prior? I was talking about that just the other night because a recurring thought of mine is, what happens, the way I framed it the other night of, there are times when people have doubt. There are times when doubt does creep in. And what if a plane hits the building at that exact moment? Is it going to be, you were a doubter. You did not have faith until the end. I've kind of left that aside. I mean, if you know Hamlet, I studied literature at university, humanities. So I read Hamlet, of course, and there's a scene where Hamlet, his father was murdered by, I think it was Polonius, and the ghost of Hamlet's father tells him to avenge his death. So Hamlet is looking for the opportunity to avenge his father's murder. He wants to kill Polonius, and he has a perfect opportunity. Polonius is kneeling down, praying. I think he's behind a curtain, and Hamlet is wrought over, do I kill him now? If I kill him now, am I sending him straight to heaven? I kill him at the moment when he's down on his knees praying. And so instead of avenging my father's death, I'm actually helping his murderer. These are difficult questions. So Virtue Signal Side, again, it's always a case where God judges the heart and orient your heart in the right direction. And I think even if we have doubts, my only hope is forgiveness. Because and I'm convinced I'm far from unique. I haven't been the worst sinner in the world. I've never killed anybody, but I've got plenty of sins heaped up. Let's see. Sojourner Dynamis to Virtue Signal Side is saying that it's neither. We are either justified through Jesus or condemned without him. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And God so loved the world. John 3:16, everyone's favorite passage. Amonarchy writes, my rapper buddy K. Rhino's lyrics. Some of these pastors are shadier than dudes in the street. Good, fair comment. And I knew you meant buddies. And Daniel writes about virtue, all of it, in his opinion. And glad you found the comments interesting. There's lots of sources online. Try and tap in with a good faith community because we need to build each other up. I think it's in Hebrews chapter 10 where it's written, do not forsake coming together as is the habit of some, but come together even more to build one another up and encourage one another, especially now as the days grow near. We need one another. And that's why I think Jesus in his time didn't want to see people kicked out of the synagogue, even though he saw the synagogues as broken, fallen institutions, just like our churches now. Jesus didn't want his followers to be kicked out. Those who came to him, he didn't want them kicked out of the synagogue. The leper who came before Jesus and said, asked for healing. And Jesus healed him and then said, don't tell anyone, just go to, go to the synagogue and make the offering as required by the law of Moses. Don't get kicked out of the synagogue. Ann Markey writes, I met a pastor who runs a bunch of churches dressed up in an expensive suit and watch and just seemed to be disingenuous and oozing corruption to me, and hoping he looks high and mighty in his fancy, expensive attire. That's what Jesus spoke of the Pharisees, and how they love, the places of honor in the synagogue, and they wear their fringes, their phylactrites or whatever they call those things, splayed out extra long and wide, and to be, saluted in the streets and esteemed in the street, and how they spoke in long-winded, very loquacious prayers so that they would be regarded well by other men. They've gotten their reward. They want to be rewarded by men. They want to be thought highly by men. No, there you go. Fill your boots. But if you want to be thought highly of by God, if you want to be reconciled to him, then you need to humble yourself. Joel Osteen, not a fan of him either, Daniel. Anyway, that's good enough. 55 minutes. So are we on the brink of World War III? Let's see what happens tomorrow. I will not be surprised if something does happen in Israel. The U.S. Attacking Islamic State in Iraq. Something could happen here. We could have Islamic terrorism breaking out in Canada, United States, Europe, who knows where. Something could happen. And many will be of the opinion, and I won't disregard it, that it's all orchestrated, that it's all planned, that things are allowed to happen in order to push an agenda. So on this Saturday, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. And he will. Invite him in. Anarchy. Give everything. Give more than I've given. And I have to struggle with this pretty much daily. It's yours. It's yours. It's yours. The enemy, Jesus is always at work, but so is the enemy. The enemy had you. He wants you back. He wants you in his camp. Don't go there. Yeah, Daniel's writing, be very situationally aware for the next few days, especially if you live in a large urban center. But even in my area, who knows? Anyway, God bless. We'll talk to y'all probably tonight. We'll see what happens, or maybe not. Depends what happens, if I have anything on my mind to say. Good night, all, or good day, or whatever it is.